welcome along to Tru Thoughts, podcast Zoom with I'm Robert Louis with special guests Anushka, aka Max, and Victoria. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, and you know what? I'm so glad that it's suddenly feeling a bit more like summer. I stepped out the house today and I was just like, yes, we're here.
Feeling good. So for anybody who doesn't know, we at Tru Thoughts working with Anushka. It's your second album. Your debut album came out on Brownswood Records, Giles Peterson's label, and then we've just put out your second album. So we'll talk a little bit about the album, a little bit about where you're from, background, and getting to this point with the album, and just sort of general sort of music chat. So I think we'll start. Shall we start sort of with the history of Anushka? So Brighton based. I met Max. Max is in a group called Dirty Diggers, and it's all right to talk about Dirty Diggers.
Yeah.
You're not embarrassed about it. I love Dirty Diggers.
No,
I still play records. So at Tru Thoughts, we had a subsidiary label called Zebra Traffic, and we did. We had For Life Cypher and a few other artists, and so we ended up working with Max and Pat, who were sort of your producers, MCs, and you sort of doing a group Dirty Diggers. And at the time, I think in hindsight, we realised we should have put you on Tru Thoughts and you shouldn't have been on Zebra Traffic, but you learn in the music industry. But it was like sort of hip hop based, but you were coming out around the time grime was popping and there was that UK hip hop scene, but you were that in between both of those, weren't you?
We sort of, we were trying to be somewhere in between, weren't we? And it was a lot of kind of like crate digging and sort of MPCs and sampling vinyl. And I think, trying to rap double time on hip hop beats, and but yeah, like loads of fun. And yeah, Pat's still one of my best mates. So I kind of, I'll always look back at that as a kind of really like fun time where I was just figuring out, right, this is how you make records. I still remember having those kind of early conversations with you guys where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this could be an album, this could be a thing, like.
And you did 2 albums for us as well. So Victoria, you're from, are you originally from Brighton, or were you?
No, so I'm from Hertfordshire, and then I moved to Brighton for uni, and like so many people ended up just staying there for a couple of years, and it was after I'd finished university that I met Max through some mutual friends. But yeah, Brighton is still it still feels like I'm coming home every time I get off the train.
And how did you and Max link up through music, was it, or did you just? I know Brighton's small. If you haven't been there.
Yeah, so we've got a kind of quite a few mutual friends, but like one really good mate of ours, Tom. So I was kind of doing some sort of parties and the producers retreat party where we'd get loads of producers together with a sound system, and Tom was one of the guys who came down to that every time and would kind of play beats. And yeah, we just got to be really good friends. And he kept telling me about this amazing singer, and he's like, oh, there's this amazing singer that I know. You have to hear this stuff. But he didn't have a studio at the time. So he ended up coming round to my studio, which was actually just the bedroom of my flat on Dyke Road. I make it sound fancy, but it really wasn't. And so he came around with Victoria, and we recorded loads of stuff for the project that they were kind of working on. But I ended up listening to it, and I think I was driving back up to Yorkshire that weekend, and I was just listening to the stuff and thinking, no, this is really like amazing voice. And even I think some of it I was just like listening to the a cappella. Just like literally just listening to Victoria's voice and being like, yeah, this is really, really amazing. And I think I don't even know if it was that session or if it was afterwards that I gave you the CD. And this shows it was a while back.
Yeah, I remember the CD.
It was like literally a CDR with some beats. And we kind of talk about this quite a bit, but one of the things with that was there were some beats that I thought were like fairly standard beats you might write a song to. And there were some that were kind of, I was trying to do this like garage techno fusion sort of Joy Orbison-y stuff at the time, and I just assumed, I put some of it on the CD, but just assumed there's no way you're going to write a song to that, especially because the stuff I'd heard wasn't anything even remotely in that ballpark. But I think Victoria, you just kind of picked up on the garaginess of it, and then I don't know, like, yeah, where did that first song come from?
I don't know, the fact, it was Yes Guess, wasn't it? That was like the first track we did together. And I don't even know, because like you said, I'm so like kind of jazz, neo soul, kind of hip hop, and that was kind of the stuff I was doing. And then it was really interesting meeting you, because it was definitely a period when I was getting kind of more into electronic music. But there was just something about that beat that just really, the urgency of it, I think, is what it was, that just really stood out from everything else that was on that mixtape.
Yeah, And
So
I think,
that,
sorry, no, go ahead.
yeah, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost, that's what the project still continues to be, isn't it? It's got this jazz sort of soul vocal side of what's going on, but there's, I know from Max, it's the electronic thing as well. But I think that's what I like about it. And I think Max's roots, because I know from hip hop and sampling and digging, it's got that. So it's not quite straightforward. It's quite interesting. And then you know, with Victoria's voice, you can sort of tell there's this other influence that's there. Which, how would you describe the sound of what you do? Is it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Such a hard one, isn't it? Because I feel there are so many influences. But I always call out like so many different genres. Max, what do you?
Yeah, well, I suppose I think this time round we've been kind of calling it future soul, jazz electronic. I think it's kind of all of those things, and I mean, you can hear it on this new record that there are tracks which are much more like You Mine is, for me, is kind of the closest to a soul record that we've done. But then there's still stuff like Serenity, which is quite electronic, quite kind of dance floor. And I think, yeah, I was thinking about this, you know, like the Venn diagram of me and Victoria and our taste and like what makes Anushka. And it's weird because the stuff that's actually in the middle is kind of like grime, garage, hip hop. There's stuff which we both really listen to. And then there's stuff that we both kind of go off on, like, I know, Victoria, you go really deep into your kind of jazz and 50s vocal harmony, and like there's all these influences that you're bringing in. And then obviously I'm kind of, and especially when we met, I was just obsessed with Rinse FM, and it was just that kind of like, what's the latest thing that, you know, Roscoe's playing. And I remember like hearing the first Subtract tune when Roscoe played it on Rinse and being obsessed, and it was like that, it was that period of my life where that was my thing. But then I think as it's gone on, it's kind of just so diffuse. There's so many things, and it's more just kind of like really with each other what sparks kind of something creative. So it's like I might send a batch of beats, and then I never know which one is like it's just literally on my computer here. I've got a beat that I've made, and I heard it, and I was like, oh, this is totally an Anushka tune. But then I have no idea until I send it to Victoria and hear what happens. And I think it's the same with the songs, where I think quite often they go on kind of tangents, and I think it's that unexpectedness of the two things coming together that actually weirdly is Anushka. You know what I mean? It's quite kind of hard to predict.
Yeah, and then from there, like you made your music, and then sort of quite soon, you did your album with Brownswood as well. I need to go back. So I mean, you did some singles, did you? I can't recall what.
So we did an EP, I think.
EP, okay.
Yeah, we did an EP. That was the Yes Guess EP, wasn't it, Max?
Yeah.
Oh, so the first tune that you actually did?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the first tune we made, and what happened was, so our manager Paul Martin is really tight with Giles and Brownswood, and he kind of sent it to Giles almost, I think, just to get his opinion on it. And Giles just played it that day on the radio, and so it all kind of snowballed from there. But I think also, I can't remember, it might have even been you who told me, Rob. I remember like Zed Bias was playing it out, so he got it from somewhere, and so there was a few people kind of supporting that track. So it was kind of like, oh well, we should probably try and get this out in the world. And that sort of, I think that the excitement around that then, you know, just gave us a push to be like, right, let's do a whole record.
So you got the focus in, isn't it? Because that can sometimes be the thing with the projects, isn't it? You can try things with people, and lots of different people happen, but it's sort of, I mean, in a nice way, all clicks in quite quickly, didn't it? With that way, and Paul Martin, I mean, he's sort of quite legendary. Working with Giles with Talking Loud, and was, you know, involved with sort of Ronnie Size and MJ Cole and all of that for Talking Loud. So I mean, that's great. So that happened quite naturally to do the Brownswood album. Which, you know, that did really well, and then I suppose there was a bit of a gap, and then we started working with you, and then I think, I mean, it might be interesting to know what the process was, because we were working with you. I'm really sorry because I lose track of time with lockdown. I keep saying last year, and I mean 2019. So I can't even recall what was going on when we first started working and talking about doing the album. I'm even, you know, lost on the timeline of that. Was it last year or the year before?
I think it might have been the year before, Max. Am I making that up?
So we did a few tracks as well with 5 Missions More. So we did like an EP with them in between. And actually the single Kendrick. So we did a single after the album, and then that single did really well. And actually weirdly that one single probably was a big part in us traveling around the world and doing all the shows we did, just because people seemed to really connect, because we did the 2 versions of it, and they seemed to connect in different ways, and it kind of really got us out there. But I think it's almost that thing where after that, you then have to kind of recalibrate a bit, don't you? Because it's like, okay, it's all happened quite quickly. You've written this music, and I think actually the thing for me is that because we can make so many different types of music, it sometimes takes us a while to decide, right, well, what are we doing next? Like, what is the next thing? Because it could be more housey, it could be more soulful, it could be more jazzy, it could be, and I think sometimes you can kind of get a bit caught up in that whole thing of genres and where are we going next kind of thing.
Because there was, I mean, for the album, you gave quite a few tracks. There was quite a few choices, and then we just sort of brought it down for the album. And I think also, yeah, that's not what I recall, because I think we probably were talking before lockdown, and then during lockdown, I mean, that's one of the things I'm saying is like, oh, maybe because there's some clubbier stuff that you've done, and I would say, look, maybe we could do a focus on, because there's not going to be any clubs, there's not going to be any gigs, because it was the start, isn't it, when we were figuring out the album's going to come out. It was that in mind. And I think, we were predicting, even we were at that time, like, we're going to be down for a good year or so, isn't it? I mean, still down at the moment, although we're opening up as we record this.
Slowly.
The UK is opening up in full on Monday, isn't it? But yeah. Well, if people were to from pre the Tru Thoughts release, if they were to check a sort of couple of releases that you've done, what tracks would you recommend for them to check?
I guess I Have Love For You is the one that people always really connect with. And like Max said, Kendrick. Are there any others, Max, that you think are?
I suppose Never Can Decide has been a bit of a kind of a favourite of people down the years. I think for me, probably, Kendrick's the one that I sort of go back to. But there's loads. It's actually interesting. The tune we were talking about, Yes Guess, it's one of those where it's always been great at the shows. Like, it always goes down really well live. But actually on Spotify, I don't think that many people have actually heard it out. So it's funny how tracks have got these independent lives, haven't they? There's ones that in your live set you're like, oh, that one's going to kill it, but then you realise actually probably only your super fans really know about that track. And so I suppose it kind of depends what mood you're in. But
yeah, it's funny with that world of DSP services, and also because now everyone knows numbers, isn't it? You get a different feeling. I think on the industry wise, I think I remember when we saw Quantic play live before lockdown, and Not So Blue is one of his tracks that's always been huge when he DJs or when he performs and all of that. And then I remember looking and seeing what the numbers were on it, and it's not technically one of his big tunes, and it's really weird that it's actually one of his big tunes, but if you look at numbers on Spotify, people would think it's not a popular record, which is a good reminder of why an algorithm and numbers aren't a thing, actually what is popular and what's not, isn't it? It just a finite amount of people in the world of Spotify find something popular there, isn't it, as well? So it's a good reminder in that sense. With this album, how did you find the process with lockdown and working and doing an album in lockdown? I mean, historically, I suppose currently what we've done, we will, I'm sure in a few years' time, we're going to look back at this period of time and the releases that we've done over this period of time, and we'll think of them as almost like lockdown albums. I know there was a big change for everyone with lockdown going on, but from the creative side of things, what was the change for you? Was it a negative thing initially, or that turned to positive, or did you struggle with it, or did you just get on with it?
We'd finished quite a lot of the music, to be fair, so there wasn't too much. I've got a little setup at home, so I was able to record and send things over to Max, and because we don't live in the same town anymore, we do that a lot anyway. But I think we both really missed, don't we, Max, like that whole coming together and sharing music. And I don't know, I definitely found it, even though I had probably lots more time, I definitely found it a time that I was probably less creative and less, I don't know, output driven, I guess, in a way. I don't know about you. How did you?
Yeah, I think probably the same, that like you say, it was, I think probably a good 80% of it was done. I think the one track on the record which is probably like the response to stuff starting to be a bit weird was like Free Will, was like probably the last one we finished on the record.
Yeah, I think so.
And you can hear it's got this kind of quite weird, slightly darker edge to it, and that was I think maybe we recorded it before, but we were kind of finishing it remotely. But I think the thing that I'm kind of still to an extent missing is it's that, getting together and listening to music in a room and just, but it's like all the little micro expressions and stuff, isn't it? Of like when you're feeling something or when you're really feeling something, and I think, Zoom's been great, and it's great to be able to do things remotely, but I think there is something in getting together in the studio, and especially I think so much of me and Vic has been just getting together, kind of like get a coffee, have a gossip, listen to some beats, mess around for a bit, and then smash out 7 tracks in a day. And that's pretty much been the entire history of us making records, is like roughly that process. And yeah, I think I was, on one level, I was just kind of like, oh wow, we can actually finish this way. This is it's kind of amazing on one level, but definitely looking forward to making a record the normal way, next time round.
And so you were okay. You didn't feel sort of pressure one way or the other about when it all changed, because when we went into lockdown, the process sort of kept going for you as far as you were concerned, or
yeah. I think we still managed to keep going. I think like you were saying, Max, I think I didn't really feel any concern that we wouldn't get it done, but it's more that there's like a bit of magic, isn't there? There's a bit of like an energy exchange when you're in a room, when you're actually recording with someone and you're getting that instant feedback, and you're like, oh, let's do this, or let's add that harmony, or let's just change this bass note, or whatever it is that you don't really get in the same way when you're apart.
And I think I've noticed, I think sort of subconsciously we're kind of holding off on getting all the next wave of music really going until we can actually sit down and do it properly. Because I think like, I kind of make beats as a sort of meditative activity. I just do it anyway. But I think that thing of like, getting together and being like, this is the one we're excited about. Oh, it needs a middle eight. Oh, it needs some other elements added to it, or let's try. Or my favorite bit of the recording process is like Vic will come with a song and then just hearing her layer the harmonies. That's always been my favorite part of the whole thing, is just that happening. And it's obviously great when Vic records it and sends it to me, but I on a kind of process level miss the magic of hearing that happen. It's little things like that, isn't it, that you kind of you realize, okay, well, you can still make the record, but as a producer, and I think probably every producer has their, it's like, micing up a hi-hat and watching a drummer record. There's little things that just as a producer you're like, oh, this is fun. And I think that's it. I think getting it done is fine, but maybe it's sort of like 75% enjoyment levels.
So with the album, a question I'm always curious about with artists when they're recording stuff is any sort of music that was influencing them, or they were enjoying as they were sort of in the process of recording, that stands out, and that it doesn't have to be sort of that direct reference about I was really listening to this, and if there is, that's interesting, because sometimes I'm fascinated with the process. I was speaking to Yemaya, who's a newer artist on the label, and he was talking about when he was recording out his album how much he was listening to so much Brazilian music, and then it was like, oh yeah, I could just I made that connection. Now how can I see where that influence was actually a little bit in his music, but it's not. You wouldn't go and listen to that and say this is a Brazilian influenced album, but you can do that. So I'm just curious, like, was there stuff that you listened, even if it was something of a totally different genre, to get your mind in a different place, but anything that you can think of as you were recording this that was good memories or good soundtracks or songs?
I think for me, like, I went to see Akhenaten, Philip Glass opera, and like I just loved that, and like it's one of those things that my husband and I always listen to. It's like our Sunday morning like listening, and there's a few bits. You remember, Max, we were talking about it. It's like it's that triplets and like the movement, and there's kind of little things that you do that are very similar in that way, and I think that's something that's maybe not a real obvious influence, but definitely something that I was listening to a lot.
There's like, for me, there's like a couple of really obvious ones that are actually like, so there's on Free Will, there was this one film soundtrack that I was just got obsessed with for a week or two, and then Free Will, it doesn't actually sound anything like it, but in my head I was trying to do it's sort of this like 70s classical but with a bit of wah wah jazz fusiony thing, and that was one. It's this film The Gambler was just, it's like a cool soundtrack, but when I think about it, I, especially over lockdown, I've read this book about Thelonious Monk, and it just started me, because I'd never really properly gotten into like bebop and that era of jazz, and I just started listening to loads of Thelonious Monk, and I was trying to like practice piano at the same time. So I was, you know, when you go quite deep into something, but then at the other side, like because of the work I do with young people, just loads of drill. So I kind of always have to listen to loads of drill for work. And then I was listening to, and then if you imagine like lockdown, Thelonious Monk and drill is like cognitive dissonance just bottled. So I think, yeah, and I think then I then kind of I'm like, oh, I need to listen to some ambient music or something. To
Chill me out.
But yeah, I
Love it.
suppose that's probably the.
So is there any drill tune you were nodding your head to in your studio specifically, or it's just a general soundtrack?
Do you know? Well, I remember like, so I was doing. I've taught a few online projects over lockdown, and one of them was some kids in East London who were all excluded from school. They were all obsessed with Zone 2. That was their favourite drill crew. But you know, all the usual suspects. Yeah.
And I just want to add, Max, you do a lot of youth work as well. That's away from music. That's one of the things you do.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, like influence-wise, that's probably one of, especially like early days of Anushka, that's one of the biggest influences. Like all the music that me and Vic kind of bonded over was like loads of that like sort of early 2000s grime. And I was only listening to that because I was working with loads of kids who wanted to do grime stuff. So it's like, and funnily, actually, the sounds on the first Anushka record, there's loads of weird like donk sounds and hard house sounds that you don't really notice. They're a bit subliminal, and those all came from working in Lancashire with young offenders who all wanted to make bouncy house. So I had all these sample packs, and I think it's one of those funny things where like that's probably the biggest influence in a weird way on a lot of the weird noises in my beats. Anyway,
bouncy house remixes we need to get.
Yeah. Just don't ask me to put a donk on it. Yeah.
I'll do the plug for the album here. I'll hold that up as well. So look. So yeah, let's get to. It's pronounced. Is it Yemaya? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep. Yemaya. Yep.
Yeah. So let people know where does the title come from for the album?
So Yemaya is like an Orisha, like a goddess, kind of, so like a Yoruba tradition that was kind of brought over with the transatlantic slave trade to the Caribbean. And I was kind of exploring a bit more about kind of different religions and trying to find something that kind of I felt was a bit of a fit, and just reading around the subject. I just like to read about those kind of things anyway, and understanding a bit more about my heritage and some of those stories that I heard growing up, and just exploring it a bit more. And we were trying to find a title, weren't we, for the album, Max? And I think we were like, the working title was something like Guided or Guided by the Moon or something around that kind of that idea. And the more we spoke about it, the more it seemed to fit with this. So she's kind of like the protector of women and children, and she also is like quite big on the journey, so about like kind of protecting you as you go through different changes. And it just felt like it really fit with lots of the themes in the record. I don't know, Max, what do you think? Did it kind of start to sing?
Well, no, that's it, because I think obviously I sort of see the record emerge song by song, and so it's quite different for me. It's quite different to everyone else hearing it when it's like, here's the whole. And so I suppose it's always like, what are the themes? Like, what are the recurring themes? And there was quite a few that just kept recurring. And then I think we're trying to think, well, okay, what brings together these themes? And then I think when Vic kind of came up with the Yemaya and kind of explained the significance of it, it's like, oh yeah, well that makes perfect sense for all of these songs. And it was just kind of, it's kind of cool seeing it happen like that. And I think actually, just hearing you talk about it now, it's like, I think if there's ever been a time we need guiding through a difficult journey, that feels like right about now, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I felt, with the title. I had to do the interview thing, pretend I didn't really know where the title, because obviously the press releases in the background from running the label. But it's just, I mean, it's a really amazing title, and I love it. And I think that's sometimes it is the amazing thing about what music can do, isn't it? And titles and things like that, because occasionally we get sent demos from people and they just call their song, jungle jazz or something like that. And I say to her, you've got to give something, you've got to give proper titles, give something from yourself into, the thing, because that's really what, communication and, sharing information and getting people to understand different things that are going on. And particularly, I think, particularly with lockdown and the Black Lives Matter movement and all of this year was going on, it was really amazing to, find out what, in a simple way, that one word, what, the deepness of what it's about and what is behind that as well. It's great. With great artwork as well, haven't we? Which, yes.
So actually the artwork, I'm part of a book club where, again, we read books by Black authors and we discuss them. It's all the stuff we didn't get to do at school, basically. And I was really lucky to be introduced to Charlotte in that book club. And she's just this amazing kind of Black British artist, and all of her work just so fit with, it felt like during all the stars align, and I was like, we have this album and this is the concept and these are the songs and these are the themes and this is like how I'm picturing it. And then she came up with this beautiful artwork that was just so perfect, and it really felt like a bit like fate, didn't it, Max? That it all just seemed to just click into place.
It just came together.
When we saw the image, and then it was like, as soon as we saw it, when you sent it through, it was like, oh god, this is going to look amazing on vinyl. It was one of those where sometimes we get the artwork in and we know, okay, vinyl, that is going to look great. So I'll do the plug. The album's, it's out on vinyl, it's out on CD, digital, streaming, and all of that as well. And Charlotte's work, she's worked with some quite sort of big artists.
So she's worked with FK Twigs. I'm trying to think if she does loads of bits, but she's definitely worth checking out. Her artwork is just amazing, and that was kind of like my thing with it, is I just thought, if we have this amazing, so we were so lucky with the last record, we worked with Fred Butler and PC Williams and a few other amazing people, so we've been really lucky in that kind of art world to just have this amazing group of people. And Ryan Hawaii.
So we've been pretty lucky with our collaborators. We've had some great artists involved, and I think with this one, the thing that I really love is the way that there's that incredible image, and then the vinyl is clear, so it's like almost like the sea. It's like just the way that all comes together is like,
when you put the vinyl out, it does look really good, doesn't it?
Even if you hate the music, it's worth just getting it for the beautiful vinyl that you can put on your wall.
I've got to say, I was wearing my Ryan Hawaii t-shirt. I've got the David Cameron Hates the Mandem t-shirt from Ryan Hawaii. I was just wearing that on Monday, actually, after the football results. So.
I love it.
So just with the album, like, if you were, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you had to say to someone, look, check the album, and I'm just one song I'll give you just to check it, to listen to. I know we supposedly live in a day and age where everybody doesn't have enough time, which is technically, I don't think is really true, but just to try and get people into the album, what song would you recommend, and maybe a little bit about the song and why you'd recommend that. I don't know if you've got the same song, but if you've got one each, that's fine.
I was going to say, Max, you go first.
So I'd maybe say You, My Love. I think for me, it's almost, that was the song where when we made that one, I was like, this is the vibe. Like, I felt like we'd kind of, because it's quite kind of, it's about the journey, but it's kind of traveling through different lifetimes. It's quite astral. It's got the kind of electronic elements, but it's very much about the song. It's sort of, I think in my head anyway, that song, and it was why it was like the kind of the first track that we shared, because it just sort of, it was a bit of a mission statement of, this is the kind of record that it is. And it's, I think what it is it's pretty experimental, but it's also just a really brilliant song. And I think that's, in a nutshell, that's the thing, isn't it? We're trying to do stuff where, it is going somewhere, it is kind of pushing in a direction, but I think so often records that do that, the song is a bit of an afterthought, and it's like, I think the whole thing is it's built around the song, and that's the kind of the focus. So I think, maybe for me, I'll go with that one. It's difficult. It's really difficult.
What about you, Victoria?
I was going to say, to pick just one. So I would say probably I Love You Mine. I just think that's such like a beautiful.
So little technical issue there, but we're back. So Victoria, we're just about to say what song you were going to choose.
So I think for me, You Mine is it's just probably my favorite song on the record. I love Max's production is kind of takes it somewhere else. It's a bit different from maybe what we've had before, and I just love it as a song. I just think you can really connect with it on lots of different levels. So that would probably be the one that I would recommend having listened to.
Cool. All right. So just with the, I always like to ask artists with we put out an album. I mean, you've been involved in the music industry for a little while, and you've got a bit of experience now within it. In the current climate of what's going on in the music industry, I mean, how are you finding it? I mean, I think one of the things we see, there's the sort of social media aspect of maybe presenting yourself in a certain way, or art. You can get lost or feel pressure with social media, or potentially feel pressure with social media to present yourself in a certain way. And the other thing is just about I mean, we've touched on it with the streaming services and numbers and people knowing how many listens and popularity and all that. I just wondered, if you've got any advice for artists on sort of how to sort of manage that side, or how you manage that side of things, or if you were advising a newer artist about that, or even an artist who's feeling a little bit, they've been going a little while and feeling how they are in that world. If you've got any advice, and just sort of any tips about, what has worked for you, particularly after lockdown as well, with it, I think a lot of people have struggled with generally, any good advice you might have for anyone listening?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the classic one is that kind of trust the process thing, isn't it? Of basically the way I think about it, and because I do talk to young people about this quite a bit, I end up saying this all the time, but it's like, if you enjoy making music, then you've already won. You're already winning. You've already enjoyed the process, and then whatever happens with it beyond that is a kind of a bonus. And really, if you've enjoyed making a record, 9 times out of 10 people enjoy listening to it.
Mm.
And I think that's been borne out by my experience over the years. Like, the more fun you have in the process of creating something, it tends to translate into people just picking up on that vibe and being like, oh, I like this. And I think, that goes for life in general, doesn't it? I think if you're positive and you're putting that out in the world, positive things come back to you. And I think that's it. I think and do you know what it is, actually? And this is something my wife said to me, which really struck home, is that, if you make the record that you want to make, then at least one person will definitely like it. And if you make the record you imagine someone else might like, it's possible nobody will like it. And then when you think about it like that, when there's one, there's more. So, like, if one person definitely likes it, well, there's probably other people like you that will like it as well. And it's deceptively deep, that, when you think about it. But it's that thing of, when you're thinking about Spotify metrics, or you're thinking about what type of show will I get booked to do off of this record, or will the label like this, or will our previous fan, but all these different imaginary things you can think about, they're all abstractions. So it's like, you can't actually know any of those things. They're just you speculating. Whereas you do know, like, when I was sitting making beats last night, and I made a beat that I thought was really good, and I actually know that I thought it was really good. And then I woke up this morning, I played it, I was like, oh yeah, it still sounds good. If I'd have been thinking like, oh, how's this going to do on, is this going to get playlisted on New Music Friday? I'm not going to make a good track, because I'm not thinking about the track. I'm off,
Yeah,
in some abstraction somewhere. It's easier said than done, to be fair.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's great advice. It really is. What about you, Victoria?
I was going to say, I think like playing into that as well, Max. Like, it's an old one, but comparison is the thief of joy.
Oh God, yeah.
And that's so Instagram, isn't it? Like, that's so the dangers of Instagram. And I think the more that I found, the more that we're just authentically who we are. Like, Max and I aren't that cool sometimes. Like, I find that I'd really noticed that it shows, actually, when I started just being myself a little bit more on stage. That was when we really started to connect with our fan base. Yeah. And people liked my kind of weird, like, quirky behaviors and my weird little tangents that I go on, and my little conversations. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Is that no one is better at being you than you, and there's no point trying to be a rubbish copy of whoever your favorite artist is. So that's what I think.
And the thing with that as well, I think as a young artist, you sort of have to copy. So, like, when we're starting out, we're all copying someone. But it's that point, isn't it, where when all of those things start to blend and you find your own voice, that's when it gets exciting. But yeah, if you're trying to copy someone to get success, it's just not going to happen, is it? It's because it has to come from you, doesn't it? I think.
Very good advice. I mean, and in tying into what your wife said, Max, I mean, I'm going to start using that, I think, when I'm speaking to artists, because it's really good. Because I'm always saying, you know, I was speaking to some sort of newer artists we just signed last night, and they're sort of doing some more music, and I because I've had success with their initial release, and I say, just remember, don't make a record for Tru Thoughts, just continue, and you don't have to do a copycat of what you've just done as well. And I'm always saying that, don't make a record for us, make a record for you. But I think that one, making it for yourself and liking it, is such a key thing, which you can, you know, I think, you know, I've seen from working with artists, it's normal, you can get lost with it. I think particularly the longer you are that you're doing music, you can sort of figure out, you're trying to figure out where we were. Even as a label, I think we had that a few years ago, just before we signed Zed Bias, and remember I was trying to figure out, well, where are we at a label? We've gone past this sort of funk soul thing, and, you know, we want to go in another direction. And there was, you know, sort of electronic thing that was going on that I wasn't particularly into, and I played bits of it, but it wasn't like I didn't want the label to go in that direction. And then I just realised I've just got to play records that I like. I started, you know, even affecting my DJing, and I realised I was doing my, you know, night, and I realised I'm just going to play records I like, and if no one comes to see me, at least I played records that I like. Yeah. And I think that's just a general thing with music, isn't it? If you trust your own instinct, sometimes that's a really key thing, and enjoying as well, isn't it? It's such a key with music. So yeah, brilliant advice. So cool. Look, I think we're probably running out of time now for this, but the other, just so we can do the you know, for people to keep in touch with what you're doing, you know, I don't know what social media, you know, if people want to follow you and see whether what social media do you use, and what's the...
So yeah, everything is Anushka UK. So all Anushka and then just UK at the end. I think that's everything, isn't it?
What you mainly on? Is it Instagram?
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the good stuff.
I never go on Facebook, so I don't know. I know I see the Insta stuff, which is all good as well. So look, that's brilliant as well. So yeah, cool. Okay, that's great. And as we're finishing this up, I know you've given your one track that you really liked from your album, but if we were to go, okay, you know, we're going to finish off, you know, now with, you know, what track would you like, you know, finish off if it was that end of the night tune, basically, of Anushka?
End of the night.
I've been thinking about this a bit in terms of, like, you know, like DJing, because I've been starting to put together some mixes and stuff, and I think there's like Brave and Bad Weather, I think, are the ones I'd play out. They're probably the tunes that are like, you can put them on and I think at the moment it's like you were saying, Vic, like the sun's coming out, it's kind of like maybe it's time for a party tune. So I don't know.
Yeah. And me, Serenity and Go. I know that.
Go. I love it because it's long as well, that track as well. There's a few.
Yeah, I think going back on what I said, I think Go is possibly my favourite one on the record. Like, I don't know if it represents everything as well, but like that's stick that on and enjoy the next 9 minutes.
I know for me, Bad Weather is definitely that track that is making me missing Doom. I do Sonic Switch my night in Brighton every month, and it was like, that is a record that's like, it wasn't, I know you didn't make it for the night, but it's one of those tracks that I know just always goes down well and all of that. So that's one of those that I'm but look, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us as well. So yeah, just make sure you check out the album Anushka on Tru Thoughts, Yemaya, vinyl, CD, digital, streaming. And if you like it, tell your friends and family about it as well. So, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Cheers. Thanks, Rob.
I'll stop.